I'm recording this video on Thursday, May the 25th at about 3:55 p.m. and I'm watching this whole train wreck play out in real time that's about to have a real profound impact on us immediately and will pretty much forever change the United States standing on the world stage. Now I realize that by the time I release this video on Friday morning or maybe over the weekend, things will change and this issue will get resolved, but indicators point to that not being the case, and quite the contrary. As we predicted and discussed in previous videos on this channel, the whole debt ceiling debate is really coming down to the wire. The deadline is so close that legislation can't really even begin to be written and presented and voted on in time to avert this crisis. The U.S. government is expected to run out of money to pay its debts if the debt limit is not raised or suspended in less than a week from now. And of course, this could all change by the time you watch this video. So forgive me if our government somehow comes together in the 11th hour before you watch this video. And that being said, I'm pretty confident that all that can happen to avert a shutdown at this point is a continuing resolution as they've done in the past, which we'll talk about a little more in a moment. We're also going to discuss the real impacts that this is about to have on all of us here in the United States and the world for that matter. And I'll also announce another giveaway, so definitely stick around for that. But first, we have to talk about the big lesson, the big takeaway that you should understand here. And as a prepper, I try to look at issues and find a lesson, a threat, an indicator, if you will, of what I can expect in the future based on how events play out in the present situation. But unfortunately, one of those threats to your safety and financial security is government dysfunction, partisanship, infighting, and bureaucracy. And let's look at a few practical examples for a moment that legitimately impacted people's lives. There have been multiple instances in recent history where political factors hindered disaster relief's timely and efficient delivery. Examples include Superstorm Sandy in 2012, where debates and negotiations in Congress ended up delaying the approval of federal aid packages, and Hurricane Katrina in 2005, which faced criticism for slow and inadequate initial response due to political disagreements. Additionally, Puerto Rico's recovery from Hurricane Maria in 2017 was also affected by controversies and disputes over the allocation and distribution of federal aid. Now, these incidents really underscore how politics can sometimes impede the swift and effective provision of assistance to affected regions. And we'd like to think that the people we elect have our backs, but it's clear that's not always the case. After each of these disasters, more and more people often come to prepping because they realize that ultimately their survival is in their own hands. And maybe you realize this after suffering through a disaster. I saw a large boost in viewers on my channel a few years back after the Snowmageddon event in Texas, where the systems and structures failed miserably. Perhaps you were frustrated at how long it took to restore power, obtain clean drinking water, or acquire basic necessities. And sometimes it's not a natural disaster, but a personal crisis that really sets people on the path to prepping. And a sudden job loss or medical emergency might have resulted in chaos, suffering, and the inability to meet basic needs. Or maybe you're like me and you look at the world and see a period of transition that's already started and accelerated and realize that increasingly your well-being is in your own hands. Really, the takeaway from this latest but not surprising chapter of government failure to really reach an outcome is that you must rely upon yourself. And we stress on this channel quite a few core principles of preparedness: your health, your food storage, water, medicine, security, energy needs, and so forth. And we then support those core principles with practical and hands-on how-to videos. And like you, I feel a pressing need to do even more. I'm going to be working in the coming months on a vertical garden in an enclosed and container garden area because I can see a time in our not so distant future when our agricultural systems won't be able to keep up with the extremes of weather. Increasingly, the burden of food, it's going to be shifted away from large corporations and really onto our shoulders. And additionally, I believe that traditional gardening is going to face a lot of uphill battles as well as we see these extreme weather events continue to play out more and more. I also know that many people want to understand how to grow what they need to live on without being dependent on the government or the agricultural production system. In order to do these projects, as I've mentioned in recent videos, I've picked up a few sponsors to fund these projects. So I'm going to get to what this debt ceiling crisis will look like in the coming days and weeks momentarily. But before we do, I want to introduce today's sponsor. Thanks to Contingency Medical for sponsoring this video. A key element in preparedness is medicine, but obtaining these to stockpile can be difficult. Contingency Medical addresses this issue by answering the question, what medication would an emergency physician keep on hand at all times, both for longer-term emergencies and for emergencies on the go? Now, they address these needs by providing 3 kits on their website that you can choose from. I selected the Ready Pack Plus. It has a wide range of antibiotics that I would want on hand if there were to be a disaster. It provides coverage against strep, as well as over 10 common infections that affect the urinary tract, skin, respiratory system, and ears. Plus, it's practical, addressing common issues when I travel with my family, like nausea, diarrhea, and motion sickness. Each pack provides access to the prescribing physician for advice on safe and effective use of the medicine, as well as a booklet that outlines each infection and the course of treatment. Packs are available in Canada and the United States. If you'd like to learn more, I'll post a link below along with the coupon code CPFREE. Your medical needs are just one of many that can go unmet after a disaster, so I encourage you to prioritize them in your preps. Now, getting back to this current national financial crisis we face, understand that truly nobody knows where this road of defaulting on the national debt is going to ultimately lead. Any pundit or politician out there saying it will all be okay is not really giving you the whole story. We know from experience what can happen in the first days and weeks. If the Treasury is forced to only pay interest on debt to avoid default, it must take from other pools of money. And that means social safety nets like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and the Affordable Care Act, they all stop. Pay and retirement account contributions for federal workers, military personnel, and postal workers can be delayed or suspended, or these workers may be asked to work reduced hours or even be entirely furloughed. Pell Grants and tuition assistance for education stops, farm subsidies are held up, funding for national parks, libraries, and nutrition programs like school lunch programs can all be temporarily suspended. And most of the national infrastructure system, like construction on roads and bridges, is mainly federally funded. So that's also going to get suspended indefinitely as well. States really receive a good amount of federal funding, so that all gets put on hold. Basically, all funding is frozen, it's slowed or questioned, and every agency that receives funding has to make the tough decisions about stretching the resources that they have in their inventory or just cutting off people entirely. Businesses and colleges that receive federal grants for research or manufacturing all have to cut back or work for free while the government sorts things out. You can imagine that won't last long, and thousands of businesses will be forced to downsize. And this is where you typically hear the projections on the number of job losses. Some of this happens quickly, but the Treasury Department will continue what it calls extraordinary measures to pay the nation's bills, leading to delayed payments or default on debt obligations. And these extraordinary measures involve not paying for some things to allocate money to pay for other things. Some call it robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's really a shell game where they desperately try to move money around to the most essential areas and let the rest fall apart as gently as possible. It's here where some will argue, good, let that happen. They think that if we just let it all burn to the ground, then maybe like a phoenix, we can build something new. And that's a little bit short-sighted as well, to really put it mildly. That's like redlining the engine of your only car because you want a new one. Do you have the money for a new car, or do you have one lined up and ready to drive off the lot? If not, you better be prepared to walk when your engine blows. And I mean, clearly, something must be done about our government spending and debt. I'm not dismissing that, but completely dismantling the whole structure, letting it burn to the ground might not be the most prudent path forward. It's important to note that these extraordinary measures are temporary measures intended to provide the Treasury with additional time to manage its finances while waiting for Congress to raise or suspend the debt limit. And they're not permanent solutions, and they can't sustain the government's financial operations indefinitely. Ultimately, a resolution must be reached by Congress to address the debt ceiling and ensure the continued functioning of the government without disruptions. And while Congress debates and the government shuts down and extraordinary measures are implemented, like a tourniquet on a bleeding artery, the rest of the world will move away from America. Countries will divest in America, and they move their currency away from the traditional US dollar as a reserve currency. And when these countries leave, they might not come back very quickly, or if at all. They might choose to transact in the Chinese yuan, the Indian rupee, the United Arab Emirates dirham, the euro, or the British pound. And countries in the future are going to be reluctant to invest in a failing economic system. And again, I think that's one of the main points that's so often overlooked in all this discussion, is that if we default, this is a permanent strike on our record that we can't rescind. And this ends up strengthening the authoritarian and communist countries that make up the BRICS alliance. The United States' stature in the world, its place on the economic stage, is really tarnished with each passing week of a shutdown, especially since it's not the first time, and at this rate, certainly won't be the last time. And let me quickly do a giveaway before we move on. For this week's giveaway, we're going to take and give away a copy of the Prepper's Canon Guide. To be eligible for a chance to win, just simply post a comment below, click the thumbs up icon, and in the following video, we're going to use the tool to randomly draw a winner from the comments on this video. And for this last week's winner of the 8-day food supply, 96 tabs of emergency food replacement, the winner is a subscriber, TH Tomb. I'll reach out to you shortly to get that sent to you. All right, let's chat about what you should be doing. As of next week, we will be out of time. It won't be a hard stop on everything, but you're going to begin to see the pretty dramatic failings start out. The stock market will plunge, so your retirement account will tank. There could be more bank failures. There will be food supply and agricultural disruptions. There will be routine maintenance on infrastructure systems which will need to be put on pause. These are all of those possible halts in funding and more. And if you haven't already, I would encourage you to pick up some food items to have as a backup. I did a video recently entitled How to Build a 3-Week Emergency Food Supply. And it's a great place to start if you haven't already started building in a food emergency supply setup. I would encourage you to establish the prep of a financial safety net by saving on a regular basis and minimizing expenses. You need to acquire essential supplies and develop practical skills like first aid and food preservation. And by taking these steps, you can enhance your resilience and readiness to really navigate the challenges that may arise during a crisis. Being proactive today ensures you and your loved ones are better prepared for the uncertainties that lie ahead. And while the country will not go into a tailspin overnight, this debt crisis clearly indicates the direction things are heading as a nation. It's in everyone's best interest, I would say, to really continue to prepare. And look, we emphasize the importance of being prepared for various situations. Relying solely on others to come to your rescue is not a realistic expectation. The current situation is yet another example of how our leaders struggle to accomplish even the most fundamental task. Can we truly have confidence in their ability to support us during a significant crisis? It appears that political posturing for power takes precedent over meaningful progress. The scenario really reflects the normal state of politics, where both sides are deeply entrenched, hindering significant advancements. And let that be a meaningful takeaway for you and the catalyst for getting prepared today to go on your own, to become less dependent on a system showing significantly greater cracks with each passing hour. As always, stay safe out there.